we're going to be in both the Old and New Testament today. Turn to Philippians chapter 4. We'll start out there, come back there, but we'll also be in Genesis chapters 42 through 45. So put your fingers in the two places. We're going to go on a journey talking about worry. And here's what. Here's our core verse. This is your assignment for the week. Has to do with worry. Philippians chapter 4, verse 6. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. So how many of you deal with anxiety or worry? Well, you don't have to raise your hand, but now we know. I would say that there's a good portion of us that still qualify. Some of us may take medication for it or go and talk to somebody about it. But I think all of us, we have a little bit of a tendency to worry, don't we? This week, it rained a lot. I think I heard on the radio that the local meteorologist got like 7 inches of rain at his place, and he lives just north of us. So I don't know what we got. I want to say something like 5 or 6 inches out at our place. We live on a big rock. Okay, just so you know, Plateau, the Cumberland Plateau, great big giant rock. If you dig down at my house, you go down about 18 inches and you hit rock. So I'm just thinking, with enough rain, all of that's just going to slide right off, and end up in Knoxville or Cookville or something like that.
Well, what if you were in California?
Yeah, that's true. But there's a reason. God getting even with California. No.
Yes.
No. Stop that. That's so judgmental. No. So do you worry? And here's some signs of worry. You worry very much about everyday things. And for those who are in the anxiety, worry spectrum, it's everyday things. My mom is the queen of worry. And every once in a while she'll say something out of her, well, I worried about you. And I'm thinking, Mom, I'm 61 years old. You can stop. I can get in the car and drive. That sort of thing, right? I was worried about you. Have trouble controlling your worries or feelings of nervousness. Do you identify? Know that they worry more than they should. Feel restless and have troubles relaxing. How many? And some of this is in the spectrum of sleep. Some of us in here lay down in the bed, put our head on the pillow, and boom, suddenly unconsciousness. Yes. Others of you don't, and here's what. You have troubles relaxing, you have a hard time concentrating, you're easily startled, you have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. Can you raise your hand just a little bit? Yeah. You feel easily tired or tired all the time. Now, I had the flu. I felt like that, but I don't feel like that normally. Have headaches, muscle aches, stomach aches, or unexplained pains. Have a hard time swallowing. That wouldn't surprise me. You tremble or twitch. Be irritable or feel on edge. That's called raising teenagers. Sweat a lot, feel lightheaded or out of breath, or have to go to the bathroom a lot. I wasn't sure about the bathroom a lot thing, because if so, then I'm capital crimes. And we all do kind of worry a little bit. I had a doctor at my house yesterday morning. Yeah, OBGYN, nothing's happening, just so you know. He wants to catch the bug on turn. So he came over with a chunk of pine and started a couple of weeks ago when I still had the shopsmith. I still have the shopsmith. And so he started his bowl on that, but he finished it on my Laguna lathe yesterday. So I suddenly dawned on me, I'm thinking, well, I've invited this guy over to work on a machine that's got a 3-horsepower motor that spins heavy objects of wood at high speeds. And so what could happen if one of our 2 OBGYN surgeons in town suddenly has a block of wood fly off and hit him in the head? So that's worrying. That's in that classification, isn't it? You know, it's like if I get conked out, I can handle that. You know, it's probably just going to bleed for a little bit. But if a friend gets conked out, well, yeah, that's a different story. So are you a worrier? Do you deal with that? Does today's core verse, does it, you know, can you identify, in other words? This morning, when we go ahead and turn back to Genesis chapter 42, and I want you to look at one of the best stories about worry that there is in the Bible. I love this passage. Now, on this section is, I think I've got it in the next screen, the 9-chapter setup. There should be a hyphen between 9 and chapter. I'm sorry for the grammar police. The 9-chapter setup. We're starting in chapter 42, but the truth is, this whole story is 9 chapters long, and I'm just going to abbreviate the whole story. But this is the story of a guy named Joseph. We're going to pick up in the middle of the story. I'll give you some background. We'll read a few verses. We can't afford to read the whole thing, not unless you want to be here till tonight. But this is quite a story. Chapter 42 of Genesis, verse 1. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, see, we're in the middle of the story. You're thinking, I didn't know that. He said to his sons, why do you just keep looking at each other? Now, how many of us have said this, particularly to your teenage children? Why are you sitting around the house just staring at each other or looking at the TV? So here it is. It's 4,000 years ago, and there's a father who's looking at his sons. Some of them are adults, some are teenagers, but he's looking at these kids and he's saying, what are you sitting around staring at each other? Somebody go mow the lawn. Have you said that? Yeah, take care of things. Get things moving. So can you identify with Jacob? So why do you just keep looking at each other? Verse 2. He continued, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us so that we may live and not die. That's a little clue. If you don't know the rest of the story, things are pretty tough right now. Then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with the others because he was afraid that harm might come to him. So Israel's sons were among those who went to buy grain, for there was a famine in the land of Canaan also. So here's the middle of the story. And I've titled this whole section, this little intro, Joseph and Sons LLC. Or Jacob and his Sons LLC. Joseph is one of the sons. And so here's Jacob and Sons. And they're pretty much in the shepherd business. And, you know, they've got an interesting story. There is a famine that's going on. And it's affected Egypt. It's been 2 years now that this has been going on. Everybody's hungry. For 7 years there was plenty. And there's a guy named Joseph. He had been put in charge of the entire nation of Egypt, which is kind of interesting because when the Pharaoh found out about Joseph, he was in prison. And so this guy Joseph gets put in charge of everything because he tells Pharaoh what his dream means. And he says, well, you're going to have 7 years of plenty, so go ahead and stock everything up during that 7 years of plenty because it's going to be followed by 7 years of drought, and things are going to be pretty tough, and you're going to make a ton of money in the deal because people are going to come from all over the world, and they're going to want some of that grain. And so he did such a good job of interpreting the dream that Pharaoh puts him in charge of the entire nation. You know, pretty good for a shepherd boy, right? I mean, nice story. Well, Joseph, at the time he goes down to Egypt, so we're backing up quite a few chapters. Joseph, when at the time he went down to Egypt, went down unwillingly. He was the 11th son of this band of brothers. Dad had 4 wives. Well, actually, had 2 wives and 2 concubines. You know, and he had his favorites. You know, he had his favorite sons. He had his favorite wives. You know, so you can't have a favorite wife, apparently. You know. See, how many of you have a favorite wife right now? I've got a favorite wife right now. I had a preacher friend who used to introduce his wife as, "Oh, this is Lois, my first wife." And, you know, that's pretty bold. I don't know. Yeah. So anyway, Jacob had, you know, these 4 gals. He had children with all 4 gals. One gal, his favorite wife, he only had 1 son with. And his name was Joseph. He was spoiled rotten. And anybody got a spoiled rotten kid? Yeah, can you know, and it is always that favorite one. There is one that just, you know, the others come out, they turn out kind of nice, but there's, you know, you always have the one kid who's just a little on the spoiled side, smells when you're around them. I mean, yeah, smells. And that was Joseph. He was uncomfortable for the rest of his family. He would dream dreams, and he'd tell the family the dreams. And the dreams were basically the rest of his family was going to bow down to him. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I don't know if I would have told that story, particularly since Dad did things like, he gave him a coat, you know, a really nice coat. And the other boys didn't get treated like that. So they knew that Joseph was the favorite. And then he starts to say things like interpret the dreams. And they don't like that. And so they did what all brothers do. Yeah. Yeah. Man, I mean, talk about brutal. Talk about a brutal upbringing. Having some brothers that know how to pick on you. They took the kid, threw him in a pit, took that favorite coat, bloodied it up with an animal's blood, took it back to Dad, all torn up, made it look like an animal had ripped it up, and told Dad the animals had killed their brother. What they actually did was, for those who read the story, what they actually did was they sold their brother into slavery. They put him in a caravan headed towards Egypt and sold him into slavery. Now, how many of you have brothers and sisters? Yeah, the worm. So the worm, would you have ever done that to the worm?
No.
Was there a point that, okay. There were times I might have thought about selling my sister into slavery. Yeah. It just depends on what kind of relationship you have. And so they sold their brother into slavery, and Potiphar's wife, if you've seen the play, Joseph, what Technicolor, Green coat, yeah. Well, it's partly like that. So he gets thrown in jail, and the rest of the story is he ends up in charge of everything in Egypt. So that's where we are. Here's poor Jacob. He's sitting in Canaan. They're all starving. He says, "I hear there's food in Egypt. Go to Egypt, get some food. Come on back." Right? So that's where we're at. That's chapter 42, verse 8. So here's 42:6. Now Joseph was the governor of the land, the person who sold grain to all its people. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, here's these 10, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. And here's your brother, Joseph, your youngest brother, but now there's a new one, and Joseph doesn't know about him yet. So here's these 10 brothers, and remember, years ago they beat you up, threw you in a pit, sold you into slavery, and guess what? They've forgotten what you look like. It might help that you dressed up in Pharaoh's sort of clothes and you got makeup on and whatever the Egyptians do. So they didn't recognize him. Verse 7. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. Where do you come from, he asked. From the land of Canaan, they replied, to buy food. And then verse 8. So although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Now what would you do? I mean, if you're the one who's thrown in the pit, sold into slavery, it's been years, it's been so long, and things have changed so much, they don't even recognize their own flesh and blood. And you're sitting there, and you're the most powerful man in the world. President of the United States, no. I mean, most powerful man in the world. And you're sitting there and you can do anything you want. I mean, the Pharaoh loves you. You can get away literally with murder. What would you do? Well, there's a cat and mouse game that plays. We're going to skip. We're actually next going to pick up in chapter 45. So here's the game of cat and mouse. Joseph decides he does sell them. He quizzes them. He sells them some grain. He packs their money back in their bags. They get to their first stop. They're at the lodging place, and they discover that there's money in their bags that's been returned to them, and they're scared to death. He has one brother. He holds on to one brother for a while, Simeon, and he keeps him for a while, and they go back. And Dad's worried in the midst of all of this. They get back to Canaan. All the money's been returned to them. Yes, they have all this grain, more than they asked for, but Simeon's still down in Egypt, and guess what Joseph said? Hey, you've got an 11th brother. And they even said to Joseph, not knowing who he was, they said, well, there's 10 of us. There's another one down in Canaan with Dad. He's a baby brother, a little guy. And then there's one who's no more. That's all they said. There's one who's no more. And so Joseph he plays with them. And says, well, when you come back, I want to see this baby brother. And guess what? Jacob doesn't want to let it happen. I don't know why. I don't know why he would be worried that for all these years his son has been missing because he was torn up by animals. Why would he worry about this 11th son? And by the way, also a son of the favorite wife. You can't have any more with her. She's gone. I mean, it's tough. It's just tough. And he says, no, you can't have my boy. I'm not going to let you take him. One of the brothers even says, Dad, let us take Benjamin back. Benjamin is the little brother. Let us take Benjamin back. You can kill my 2 sons if I don't bring them back. I will take care of them. I will put my life on the line for them. Let us take them back. Dad says no. Long story short, finally they do end up going back, and they do end up taking Benjamin. And Joseph gets in there, and it's the same game. He doesn't let go. I mean, talk about, Joseph, just a little bit of trivia. Joseph is called the Jesus of the Old Testament. I don't know if I ever saw Jesus play this sort of game. I didn't see him toy with people like Joseph did his brothers. So he's got them all there. He's playing the game again. He gives Benjamin 5 times what he gives his own brothers, the rest of his brothers. He just treats them. They've got to be going nuts. What's going on with this guy? What's going on? He's treating Benjamin, the little boy, just really weird. He's asking all kinds of questions. They can't figure anything out. And you remember the rest of the story? he sends them back, and he takes his silver cup, and he sticks it in one of their bags, and then sends one of his servants after the caravan as they're heading back to Canaan. And you know what they do? They catch up. Guess who's got the silver cup? It's Joseph's silver cup. Benjamin. Talk about you have to change your pants. These guys had to change their pants at this point. They get hauled back, and they end up in Joseph's house, and I mean, all this stuff is going on. At one point, Joseph, he actually can't handle it. You know, when he sees Benjamin, he actually can't handle it. He starts to cry, and he hides the tears. And then we get to chapter 45. So here's, I don't know about you, I labeled that whole section. You know, it's just, it's more than a game of cat and mouse. I mean, it's just crazy. Chapter 45, verse 1. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants. And he cried out, "Have everyone leave my presence." So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. I'm thinking Benjamin, he's just wondering what's going on with these guys. But the other 10, yeah, there had to be a come to Jesus meeting. He wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him and Pharaoh's household heard about it. You know, so it became, you know, one of those little gossip things. Can you imagine what's going on at the palace? Hey, you know, Joseph is in there. He's crying like crazy with these shepherds from Canaan. You can hear him all over the palace. It's nuts. Everybody's talking about it. Verse 3. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" Nice second question, or nice first question. But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. Can you identify? I mean, it's one thing for poor old dad to be sitting down there in Canaan, and he's worried, or up there. He's sitting up in Canaan. He's worried to death about what's going on, particularly with Benjamin. I don't care about the other 10, but I'm worried about Benjamin. Did you catch that? So, talk about preferential treatment. So here's Dad. He's worried about getting food. He's worried about, you know, just paying the bills. He, you know, just worried. But now the brothers are sitting there, and they've. There is one little scene that takes place. One of the reasons why Joseph cried was the brothers were talking in their own language, and they didn't realize Joseph could understand them. And Reuben is chewing them out. He says, I told you we shouldn't have done anything with Joseph. It's our fault. You wouldn't listen to me, and you guys sold him into slavery, and this is God, basically he's saying, this is God getting even with us for selling Joseph into slavery. So, you know, they're not hiding anything from Joseph. And now they stand before him, and he's just revealed himself to be Joseph. And I don't know about you, but if I was the 10, I'd be shaking in my boots.